Kia ora koutou. Greetings, councillors, exec and support staff. Welcome to others from the Audit New Zealand, which Lainey will introduce later on. Nau mai, haere mai. Warm greetings and welcome to those who have joined us today in the public gallery and listening online. I'll ask Councillor Bryan to open the meeting with the karakia, please.
Kia ora tātou, kāku whakatuwhera tēnei o tātou hui, i roro tūna naki tanga wā tātou kaianga. O tina ki ainui tātou, he wānore ko i tātou he maunga rongo i te whenua i whakaro pai ki ngā tāngata katoa. Ngai ei hoi ngā ka hoki roto i tēnā i tēnā mātou ka tōni o tō wairua ta e āwina i tō i tohu i a mātou, kia whai kahe mātou i ngā hua pai, ngā hua tika ngā hua pāna ki tēnei o tātou hui. Ara hina mai ei ua, i a mātou runga te tika te pono te māramatanga, kia tau ai e mātou te rangi māri e. O te roa tātua, koe nenga whakamumisi wa hōri i tō i tātou. Āmine, kia ora tātou.
Thank you, Councillor. Meeting notices, so health and safety first. In case of an emergency, please follow the building warden and make your way to the nearest exit. The meeting point is located across the road at Peace Park, Mitchell Park. Bathroom facilities are located out that way, opposite the chamber foyer entrance. That's off Margaret Mahi Court. Live streaming. District Council is now live streaming our council and standing committee meetings held in our Totara room within the council building. The webcast will live stream directly to Council's website and YouTube channel in real time. The purpose of streaming our meetings is to provide greater access to Council debate, decision making and encourage transparency. Those members of the public here today, all care will be taken to maintain your privacy. However, by remaining in the public gallery, it's understood your consent has been given if your presence is inadvertently broadcast. Please be aware the overhead microphones in this room are very sensitive. So please remain quiet throughout the meeting. Conversations from anywhere in the room can be picked up and audible on the live stream. Again, I welcome you all and appreciate the interest you've shown in our discussions today as we give consideration to the feedback that Council received from the CLTP. That's redundant. I remind people that this is a formal Council meeting and it will be conducted with decorum and professionalism and civility. I'm sure members of the gallery and speakers will continue to respect councillors, staff and each other. There are 5 copies of the full LTP with its supporting documents printed for the public gallery. There are 3 volumes that total 800 pages, so we only printed 5. Can I please ask that people share these, given the amount of printing that was involved, but of course you can request further copies. There are no apologies notified. Acknowledgements. Are there any acknowledgements or tributes? None. Conflicts of interest. Do members have any conflicts of interest to declare that are relevant to the business that's in the current agenda? No. Well, that brings us to the reports section, section 6, page 10 of the agenda. Leading it out will be Lainey Woolsey. It's the long-term plan 2024-34 budget position report. Thank you, Lainey.
That's Maria Koutou. Thank you so much. There are 3 papers this morning, the first of which is essentially a procedural step. During the audit of the long-term plan, we received advice that due to the fact that Section 100 of the Local Government Act requires local authorities to have a balanced budget, it would be prudent for Council to acknowledge and accept an unbalanced budget for the first 3 years and resolve that it is financially prudent. Section 4.4 of the report talks about how having a fully balanced budget in the first 3 years of our LTP would be unaffordable for our community and inequitable for the way that our assets and programmes of work are to be funded. And our special consultative procedure demonstrated overwhelming community support for a phasing of the recovery over 6 years. So this report essentially asks you to resolve that it is prudent to have an unbalanced budget for the first 3 years of the LTP, and the assumption with the audit opinion that you will hear about later is that you will do that before you adopt the LTP. So I'll take the report as read and invite any questions on the report.
Questions for Lane? Yes, Councillor Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Luca. Just in regard to that 4.3 and that deficit, I just want to tease out some of the details on that, please. As obviously I understand that while we've collected it out to 6 years to ease the burden on the ratepayers, otherwise it'd be up around the 58% mark. The surpluses in the next 7 years, what you're saying there is that we will have a surplus for the remaining 7 years, but the first 3 years are the ones that will offset the deficit from the first 3 years. So are we saying that we are to cover the deficit in the first 3 years, we're only going to do short-term borrowing to cover that deficit, and in the next 3 years we'll pay off that borrowing? Because that's what it insinuates here.
Can I invite Gary to comment on that, please?
Thank you, Councillor. I think the first thing to understand that the prudence measure dictated by legislation and the result of the accounting process is a very technical calculation. We do have to take into account the degree to which we fund assets versus depreciation. That's one of the key differences in the accounting, where depreciation is not cash, but obviously the acquisition of assets is. And also we need to fund from surpluses in the future repayments of deficits. Now we continue to repay loans all the way through, but we do need to generate surpluses to fund the principal repayments associated with the debt for the assets that we acquire now. So we will be borrowing relative to those deficit positions we identified in terms of the gap in the consultation document. And we do have them on shorter term loans that we think are most appropriate. Now, they won't be fully repaid after 10 years, but we will have started paying them down during the 10-year period.
So why did we say in this statement here that the amount that you're saying down here, further down, it's noticed in the introduction to the long-term plan, council's operating at a deficit for the first 3 years, and this will be recovered over the next 3 years. So that insinuates that we will pay back the debt of the first 3 years. Now you're saying it won't.
You're mixing a statement about repayment with debt with the technical calculation of prudence. So under the prudence measure, which is what this paper specifically talks about, a legislative requirement and a legislative measurement. Under that legislative measurement, where we will be incurring debt, technically net cash deficit in terms of the way that prudence measure is measured, we will be offsetting that by surpluses over the next 3 years. That is not the same as the repayment of those deficits, but from an accounting perspective, it is accounting to balance back to zero between years 1 to 3 and years 4 to 6. So the answer is, from an accounting prudence perspective, we do recover the deficits over the next 3 years. From a loan management, treasury management perspective, it's not quite as simple as that.
It's just that this is what the statement says, that we're going to recover it. So,
and it is technically correct from a prudence, surplus, and deficit measurement perspective. Under the legislation, the surpluses of years 4 to 6 are larger than the surpluses or the deficits of year 1 to 3 under that prudent measurement calculation methodology.
okay, I'll leave it at that.
Your Worship,
Councillor?
Dennis, I think what he's trying to say is that we will come out of deficit in the second 3 years rather than be paying the loan back.
But that's not what he's saying here.
Well, I read it that way.
Okay. All good. Okay, I'll leave it at that.
Are there any other further questions? Councillor Thanchos?
Thank you. So just to be really clear, what we're saying is that we have an unbalanced budget in the first 3 years in order to address affordability in the community, which is something we've heard a lot about. but that essentially we're taking a slightly longer term view of balancing the budget. So we create a balanced budget over 6 years rather than over 1.
Through the Chair, that's correct. And in the consultation document, although the work programme has been slightly adjusted now for the final long-term plan, the expected rates increase for the community, were we to close it faster, would be much, much higher.
Thank you.
Any further questions? If not, I have a mover and a seconder. Mover, the Deputy Mayor moves, and seconded Councillor Puller. Is there any debate? No? Okay. All those in favour? Aye. Against? The ayes have it. We now come to report 6.2, adoption of a long-term plan and supporting documents. Lainey Woolsey will lead this out, and I think Steve will pitch in a few words, and then we'll hand over to, or we'll be introducing our auditors. Thank you, Lainey.
Well, when you start a long-term plan, it seems like you're never going to get to the end because it's such a long process. But you always do reach the end, and here we are. So this is always a big day in a long-term plan process, and also for councils, because you are setting some sort of vision for 10 years and creating that certainty for 10 years. It's been a long process and quite an outstanding process, really, because of a number of things that have happened in our external environment that have impacted our long-term plan. But here we are, and we don't all have to agree. And that's one of the core principles of democracy, as councillors bring different perspectives to the table. We don't all have to agree. But what's really important is that we make decisions. Because decisions is what gives our community confidence and certainty about our direction and what we can expect. So first of all, I'd like to acknowledge the councillors and all the hard work that has gone into getting here today, all the various policies, strategies that have been reviewed, and the activity management plans and other things. I'd also like to acknowledge the project team for the long-term plan, which is a combination of the strategy team, the finance team, and communications. And I'd also like to acknowledge the various staff who have had to roll up their sleeves and put in at various stages in order to get the long-term plan process completed. In particular, our design staff, who once the document is designed, any changes that occur have to be done in design. So I would also like to acknowledge the hard work they've put in over the last 4 weeks in order to make sure that the current copy that you see today is the full and final copy. So having said that, I'm just going to pass over now to Lainey, who's just going to step you through various aspects of the long-term plan paper, and also to invite our friends from all of New Zealand to come in and talk about their opinion.
Thank you, Steve. Before I do that, I just want to note 3 table changes to the agenda. So the long-term plan that was published on the public agenda now there are 3 changes since that version. They are very minor. The first is in volume 1, page 31. The agenda version said approximately 60% of the Rex Morpeth Recreation Hub capital budget. The updated version says approximately 58%. The second change is in volume 2, page 28, within the financial strategy, similar. So this actually just brings these into alignment. The initial version said just over 50%, but the updated version also says approximately 58%. And the last change that we're aware of since the published version is in volume 1, page 69, and it's just the removal of a few words at the end of a footnote regarding how the scopes of emission sources over time will be adjusted. So I assume there's no questions on those, just need to acknowledge those changes. So the report is laid out with 14 recommendations, and a lot of those are to adopt the strategies and policies that inform the long-term plan. So they are stepped through in a certain sequence, and the long-term plan itself is the last recommendation. In a moment, I will introduce our friends from Audit, but just before I do, I just want to touch on that section. So Audit New Zealand were commissioned to determine whether the LTP gives effect to the purpose under Section 93 of the Local Government Act, which is to describe the activities of the local authority, to describe the community outcomes for the district, to provide integrated decision-making and coordination of resources, to provide a long-term focus for decisions and activities, and to provide a basis for accountability to the community. So they determine first that, and then also whether the quality of the information and the assumptions underlying our forecasts are provided adequately in the long-term plan. On Friday, we received clearance to adopt our LTP, and the final audit opinion has now been received. That is under embargo until the adopted long-term plan is released to the community. But I think we're able to distribute a copy of that opinion now before I introduce David Walker to run us through it. The rest of the paper, after the audit opinion, essentially talks through the financial implications of this plan, talks about the risks and the options analysis of what happens if you do or don't adopt it today. It also talks through the next steps about how the plan will then be published, how we will report against the plan, how the plan will be reviewed, including the annual plan process. And I did just want to say that the latest version of the plan has responded to a considerable input from the community, and for that we're extremely grateful. So I just want to acknowledge the enormous contribution that a wide range of our community have added to this plan process. And I'd also like to acknowledge all of you, because certainly since my time on this plan, I have felt very, very led by you. I think your decisions, your direction that you've given us has been consistent, and I just want to thank you for that dedication. It is a plan that I believe promotes social, economic, environmental and cultural well-being of communities in the present, but also for the future. And I just want to say thank you to the comms team, the finance team, and the strategy and policy team in particular. I'll ask David Walker to introduce the audit report in a moment, but I just want to welcome Richard Harbord as well from the Office of the Auditor General, who is our sector manager. And also just to say an enormous thanks to David Walker at Audit New Zealand, Nishant, Mayuri, and all of the others who've been in the background. Thank you so much for enabling us to get to this point. Are there any questions on the report? Or am I handing to David? Yeah, handing to David. David Walker, would you like to present your opinion?
Thank you very much, Chair, and good morning to everyone around the table. Yep, as Lanny's already pointed out, it's a massive project. And I would like to just touch on the audit opinion itself. There's some key elements to the audit opinion. The one qualification on the audit opinion is around the external funding. Effectively what we're saying, the audit plans taken the assumption that external funding will be received. And during the audit process, we were unable to actually get confirmation of that. The money was effectively uncommitted. And as standard practice where that is the case, the opinion needs to point that out. The other element is the ability to complete capital projects. There was a basic needs assessment which was done. due to funding and other reasons, that was reduced down to 70% for some projects and 50% for other projects. These are all effectively related to the compliance and resilience based projects. And because it was done at relatively short notice, we found that there's many of the projects had not been rescoped. So, for example, it's very difficult to build 70% of a reservoir, and so in simplistic terms, we draw attention to that. The final matter is we've got an emphasis of matter in the audit opinion. There's about 260 million worth of capital expenditure which has been deferred out to years 11 and 15 or to 15. There's a graph in the LTP which clearly shows that, and the emphasis of matter just draws attention to this bow wave of work that is sitting in years 11 to 15, effectively outside of the 10-year period of the LTP. Those were sort of the key matters addressed in the audit opinion. I won't touch necessarily on the audit opinion itself because you've got people around the table who are probably, it'll be a lot easier to hear from them. With regards to the audit opinion, are there any questions?
Any questions for David? Deputy Mayor and then Councillor Boynton.
Thank you very much, David and the team. Actually, it's more of a statement than a question. It's just saying that reading the opinion actually clarified for a number of us some of those points that needed some clarification. So thank you very much. Yeah.
Welcome.
Councillor Boynton.
I just had a question. I'm not sure if you might be able to answer it, but has this situation with having a question over external funding from other local government areas, is that common?
Yes, it's absolutely common. What happens a little bit around the process, when we find something like this, it does mean there's going to be additional comment in the audit opinion. It goes through a process in Audit New Zealand and the OAG. They consider the matter across the sector, and the opinion then effectively is looked at a technical team and then comes back to me. The standard basically is if there's significant funding above materiality, and the Rex Morpeth Centre alone is well above our materiality. In our audit opinion, if you got it there, we in fact talk about the Matata wastewater as well as the destination cycleway projects as well. They are of course much smaller, and the as soon as it becomes material, the funding is not committed, it is absolutely standard. There are other councils already who have qualified opinions for exactly the same reason.
Thank you.
Councillor Tenshos.
Thank you. Thank you for this. And so just as a supplementary on that, so essentially what you're doing is warning us that if we don't get the external funding, those projects may not be able to proceed.
Well, absolutely, and the LTP does, sorry, Chair, through you, the LTP does say that, but there's quite a lot that goes with it. What we're saying is, yes, the project may not go ahead without that external funding, but then, you know, things like what about operational costs? What about assumptions that, for example, if you're planning to increase rates, due to the introduction of Rex Morpeth Centre to cover, you know, operational costs. So there's multiple ramifications further down the road from that. But the starting point is whether or not you get that external funding.
Thank you. Another question on, if I may, on the inability to complete capital projects. I think what you're saying is because the overall budget has reduced, but that hasn't, but the plan doesn't indicate where individual projects may reduce by the same proportion. But is the assumption that all of those projects go ahead? Like, I would have thought the way to handle that is some projects are deferred or put off, rather than each budget being reduced by that amount. Is your assumption that all that the same number of projects go ahead, but just with less money?
Chair, through you, I have no doubt you'll spend the budget available to you. I suppose, taking a very simple example, if you were going to build 4 reservoirs, and and each of those reservoirs have their own little budgets, and just assuming that they're different points in time but the same dollar value, if your budget is cut by 25%, you're basically only going to be able to build 3 budgets. Build 3 reservoirs. And so what's happening is, in the LTP, we're showing that we're going to build 4 reservoirs, but our budget's been cut to 75%. So, so to assume that you're going to be able to build everything you've planned for is potentially an unrealistic assumption, and the scope of work had not been adjusted to be able to demonstrate that.
Supplementary from that. So what you would have liked to have seen would be kind of clearer sequencing or something like that.
Well, if you had excuse me, if you had a lot more time, no doubt you would have realigned your scope, seen what budget you've got, taken some items out, possibly deferred some items, possibly. Those were all decisions that the asset managers would have had to take, and there would have been a clearer linking between the budget and the planned scope of works.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Thank you. David, just a simple question. The difference between unqualified and qualified audit, are there ramifications for that? Reputational or otherwise, I don't know. Is it bad to have a qualified audit?
Is it bad? I guess it depends from whose point of view and the reasons for it. The best, the best you can have is a completely unmodified audit opinion, for sure. As soon as you start to get qualifications, it's trying to say to the reader, have a look at this and understand this, whatever that is. And, there's 3 of them in our report. So that's fundamentally the first step. It was, dear reader, have a look at this. Then the qualifications come in different styles and different formats. So, for example, the external funding is we're saying, have a look at that section. We can't actually get confirmation. We're not saying it's wrong. We're just saying we can't get a confirmation that we're going to get that external funding. Now, and the LTP addresses that issue. So we're comfortable that there's enough disclosure in the LTP to address the issue. If there was not sufficient disclosure in the LTP, then our audit opinion would have had to go into a lot more detail. The emphasis of matter is really it's beyond the LTP and is a different type of modification to the to the audit opinion, and it is pointing out, that there's this 260 million worth of capital works, and it's beyond the LTP. So the best way I can describe it, I suppose, is it's a pointing out to the reader at specific things that they should look at, and provides a little bit of guidance in terms of why we're pointing those things out.
Okay, thank you, David. Welcome, Stuart Henderson. Stuart, you've got a question.
Thank you, Mayor, and hi, David and the team. It's really just a supplementary to some of the comments and the questions that you've had from the Mayor and other councillors, David. But would I be right in assuming that the qualification in terms of the external funding, given that its uncertainty of it being received, was it reached a materiality with the 65 million of Rex Morpeth that took it from possibly being an emphasis of matter? I mean, I guess if I say it another way, if it wasn't for Rex Morpeth, would you probably have made that rather than a qualification? Would it have been more of an emphasis of matter?
There's several factors that come into account. Materiality is one. Other factors are the ability to scale, downsize. So, for example, if you were going to do an exhibition and it was going to be in 4 rooms, and it's a much smaller amount, but still over materiality, an exhibition you can in fact scale down. I mean, you can do an exhibition in 1 room. The other three rooms can stay unaffected. So there's multiple factors that come into account. It isn't just materiality, but materiality does play a big factor.
Okay. Just supplementary to that, would I be right in saying that in previous LTPs, this issue of external funding, that this is, you mentioned that this is consistent with what has come through from Audit New Zealand in relation to other councils, and that we're probably going to see a significant number of other councils having the same qualification to their LTPs. And is this a new thing, or in the sense that are you taking a harder line on this?
No, not at all. In fact, let's be specific here. And Stuart, I know what you're talking about. And we're talking about Rotorua's LTP. Their LTP is published, so I'm not telling you anything that's not in the public. They got a emphasis of matter over their museum exhibition, and the factors there, yes, the amount was material, but it was an exhibition, which, as I said earlier, could be done, it could be staged, it could be done, you can do a quarter, but you can't build quarter of a room or a building or a Rex Morpeth. So Rotorua got an emphasis of matter on theirs. There are many other councils that will have qualifications for this, for uncommitted external funding. It is not unique to this LTP round. I can clearly recall that being in the 21 LTP round, and in fact I think one of my councils in the 21 LTP round had a qualification for exactly the same reason. So it's not new to this round, and is Whakatane being held to a different level? Absolutely not.
Thank you very much, David. I really appreciate that answer.
I could just add one thing. When there's any change to an opinion, it goes through an opinion review committee. That's normally got somewhere in the order of about 10 people. The 10 people include a range of expertise from OAG lawyers, people who are specifically technical on various areas of the Local Government Act. The decision is made to qualify or modify or whatever the decision is out of the opinion review committee, that then goes to another specialised group who actually specialise in audit opinions, and they ensure consistency across councils, in fact, consistency within the public sector, and so you can ensure that once there is discussion of a modification to an audit opinion, the process is incredibly thorough. By the time I get it back, I do a final read of it, of course, but by the time I get it back, it's had a sector review, it's very strong technical, very strong legal review. So you can rest assured that your opinion would be set in lines with every other council.
Thank you, David. Councillor Puller.
Thank you, Bishop. Morning, David. Just a question around the three waters. Do you take into consideration that it'd be hard anybody in New Zealand knows how that's going to play out, and the goalposts keep shifting. So do you consider that when you're making an opinion or an emphasis as you have?
Absolutely, and that's one of the key assumptions. If we were adopting our LTP, I don't know, one of the options was councils could have deferred the LTP process for 12 months. Now, in 12 months' time, those LTPs may well look very different to the LTPs that we've seen being adopted now, because legislation will have changed. And so the three waters, if legislation's passed and the water world looks very different, those councils are going to have to address the issue.
Thank you. Are there any further questions for David? Councillor Boynton?
Supplementary to the three waters, because you have highlighted it here in your report, with the three waters coming back into the council, and we have identified it in our long-term plan, that would have made an impact to the short time frame in which the council was able to provide the necessary coverage of information to detail how they would reduce those projects. Has it had an impact?
Absolutely, and that would have been addressed by the sector group as well as the OAG. You're absolutely right, it's had an impact. In fact, the impact was so significant, which is one of the reasons DIA and legislation provided the various different options to councils. So you're absolutely right. The three waters was quite a big part of this LTP.
Thank you.
Councillor Tenshos.
Thank you. It's just a supplementary to John's question. He asked if you take account of, the uncertainty, and am I right in thinking actually the level of uncertainty makes it more likely that we're going to have matters arise, because it's the very uncertainty is one of the things that you're looking at in terms of the quality of the information. Am I correct?
Through you again, Chair. That's right. And when the three waters came back to councils, different councils dealt with it differently. Others almost continued where they left off. Others hadn't. So each council dealt with it differently. And if you have a look at, Nishant, if you can just try and find the page number effectively, but it's in the infrastructure strategy. If you have a look at the graph, and I'll give you the page number in your LTP, council has chosen to move all that three waters expenditure. Well, not all, but there's a huge amount of three waters expenditure that's been deferred beyond the LTP. Not all councils have done the same. So the impact effectively on the audit opinion will be somewhat different depending on how the different councils managed the three waters coming back.
Thank you.
Councillor Boynton?
Sorry, supplementary to Councillor Sanchez. Just around the three waters again. Sorry, it was to do with the balancing of three waters coming back and ensuring that we maintain affordable rates. If we wanted to, or if other councils had tried to deal with it straight away, were they more than likely to have higher rates in the first early years?
I mean, because your rates are a reflection of the funding you need to do whatever council decides to do, and you've seen that obviously through the process you went through for your consultation document. If a council's chosen to bring a whole lot of work forward, be it waters or anything else, that's going to have an effect on rates. And in fact, your earlier conversation around smoothing the budget, the unbalanced budget, council was making decisions on how soon to return to a balanced budget situation. So almost anything that moves of significance has an impact on rates.
Thank you.
Thank you. No further questions for David. Are there any general questions to do with the paper? All right, well, let's move on then. The recommendations are on pages 15 to 16.
What page now? Oh, that, okay, that, what page is it?
Page 15.
Just to say that
Of
Volume 2.
at the end of this paper, we would like the opinion returned to the governance team, if that's all right, the copies that were distributed until they're publicly available.
Can you speak in the please?
We need the opinion returned to the governance team at the end of this discussion, please. So just giving you that warning that we will be get them back.
Oh, you take these ones then.
Chair. So, sorry, we've just found a graph that shows there's all that discussion around the capital expenditure that has moved out to years 11 to 15, and volume 2, page 46 of your LTP has a graph that clearly shows that.
Thank you for that.
And can I, if it's moving on and questions for me have finished, could I just say the LTP is a massive task. It is a massive task, and anyone who hasn't actually been through a full process, it'll be very difficult to really fully comprehend, the resource it actually takes. So I really would like to just extend my thanks and congratulations to council and everyone who's contributed to it. It is really a massive process, and so Mayor and Chair, well done.
Thank you, David. Moving on to the recommendations, we need to note that recommendations 2 and 3 are really only one recommendation. So we're labelling it recommendation 2-3. So it goes from recommendation 1 to 14. So that 2-3 should read that the council adopt the financial strategy included in the long-term plan 24-34 and in accordance with section 101A of the Local Government Act. Now I propose to take these recommendations in chunks. In the event that there are members who wish to not adopt the LTP, there is a logic to it. Like if you choose not to adopt, then the financial strategy might not be one that you'd vote for. So I would recommend that I put the motion that recommendation number 1, can I have a mover and a seconder for that? Mover Councillor O'Brien and seconded Deputy Mayor Imick. I presume there's any questions about that, so all those in favour?
No.
Against? Right. Recommendation 2-3, that the council adopt the financial strategy. It's on page 184 of the agenda again, page 14. And in accordance with what I just read out before. All those who are in favour? Oh, I need a mover and seconder, sorry. Yeah, mover. Councillor Tanshaw, seconded Councillor James. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Aye.
I'm against. Yes, please.
Councillor Deans, do you want your vote recorded?
You want your vote recorded?
Yes, please.
The next chunk I propose to take in one hit are recommendations 4 through 9. They're all fairly standard and no.
I'd like 5 to be separate, please.
Okay, so can I have a mover? That's fine. Can I have a mover and a seconder for recommendation 4? Move Councillor Puller, seconded Councillor Angiaho. All those in favour?
Aye.
All those against? Councillor Dennis. Next.
I didn't
You
vote
want
against
5,
it,
yep.
sorry.
Yep.
I voted for that one, thank you.
Yeah, that's right. Recommendation 5, which is the one you're particularly interested in, that the council adopt the revenue and financing policy included in the long-term plan 2434 in accordance with section 102 of the Local Government Act. Can I have a mover and a seconder? Mover, Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Tanchos. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against?
Right, I'm against.
Councillor Dennis against. Are you now okay with us taking 6 to 9 in one? So recommendations 6 to 9. I need a mover and a seconder for those. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 4. Yes, Councillor Puller moves it. Councillor Boynton seconds it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? You guys have it. Recommendation 10, that the council adopt the Treasury Management Policy, which consists of the Liability Management Policy and the Investment Policy in accordance with Section 102 of the Local Government Act. Can I have a mover and a seconder, please? Move Councillor James, seconded Deputy Mayor Imick. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? I'm against. I'll have it recorded. Now we'll do recommendations 11 through 13. And can I have a mover and a seconder? Mover to Councillor Boynton, second to Councillor Tanchos. All those in favour?
Aye.
And the one we've all been waiting for. Recommendation 14, that the council adopt the long-term plan in accordance with section 93, and I'll allow some discussion on this one. Mover, yep. Councillor Duke, second to Councillor Puller. Right, floor's open for any discussion. We'll go around the table. Or?
Oh, I can start if you want. Thanks first off to all of the staff. It's been a long journey, and it's nice to get to this point, and thanks to the auditors. They've done a great job in getting us our audit opinion. Basically, we've tried to balance the needs and wants and keep the rates as low as possible while still having a district that people want to come and live in. We've had to fund a deficit starting position, increased inflation and compliance costs, as well as increased costs of living. We've had to account for the future demand on our infrastructure and be resilient to climate change. And we have landed where we've landed. It may not be where we wanted to have landed. I think it's higher than we all would like it to be, but it is where it is. And I'm happy to be supporting the recommendation to adopt the long-term plan.
Thank you, Councillor Dukes. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you again. Good morning, everyone, and likewise, thank you very much. It's been a long, considered and difficult process, not just for some of the new councillors, but also for some of us. This is my second term, and I guess I really didn't know as much as I thought I knew in the first LTP that I did. So I feel like I know a lot more, but it has been a really considered and well-informed So aside from some of the workshops and briefings that we've had one-on-ones with different members of the finance team. And when you're cross-referencing between the revenue policy, you know, the development contributions, the finance and the rates policy, it actually is just so much more complex than I think people who aren't involved on the inside of the tent might not be aware of. I'm really happy to support it. Where we started with the wish budget, you know, with the vision of the district and all the projects that you'd like to come in, down to the practical budget, and then we've moved into the real budget, which is affordable. And it's not affordable for all, but we've had to make that difficult decision the best we could with the information that we had, with all the external pressures and the government reforms that have bombarded us with very short time frame and with no additional funding. So yeah, I'm happy to support it. Thank you.
Kia ora tātou, yes. It has been a journey for new councillor, like, seriously. But I'll have to put it out to the staff too, and walking us through some of the concerns, the processes, but also the feedback that's come out from the community around the rates. And I feel there was a significant shift of engagement of people understanding, and there is still a path forward with some of the whānaus who were struggling. In terms of this whole process, when I'm talking with our communities, they acknowledge it's here, and we have to still keep moving forward. Sitting down at the table to talk about what we can speak about on the long-term plan and where they sit inside, you get a better understanding. We've always known for Te Ao Māori, sometimes the best conversation is around food, because it's really open and honest, and you just take in some of the concerns, but be able to what next steps and walk through that. So I'm going to support the adoption of the LTP.
Councillor Pillay.
Most of it's been said, Mr. Chair, but and I endorse that, and thank you to the staff for the efforts they've done, many hours unknown to us. But and we'll never please everybody, but what we have done is taken into account the whole district and trying to make it work. And we can't mark time. We have to keep going. Otherwise, you'd never ever catch up. So that's what we've tried to balance with the support of the staff to make an outcome that'll work. Really, thank you.
Tēnā rā koutou katoa. E mihi atu ki a tātou kai kaunihira, ki a tātou kai mahi o te kaunihira, ki a tātou hāpori. I just really want to acknowledge also our staff and also our communities and our submitters, and many of them who are in the room today. Many of them who have also contributed in their time, in their presence, in attending all of the huis over these past few months, which have been long months for ourselves, but I would also think that taking the time to attend, to submit, and even though some of those submissions may challenge us, they also provide us with the greatest opportunity to know and understand what our community thinks, and also to the solutions that they have also provided. I believe that we are in challenging times, but with our challenging times comes the greatest opportunities for innovation, the greatest opportunities to be able to sit and listen, to debate, to disagree, to agree to disagree, but to be able to know that we have heard everybody and that we've worked hard to find the right solution that suits as many people as we can to improve our community's future. So I mihi to all of you here in the room, and I mihi to all of those from our rangatahi right through to our hapu, our maraes, our sports groups who came in and took the time to submit and contribute in their way towards the future long-term plan over the next 10 years. So I support this long-term plan going through because of the amount of work that has been done, and because I know confidently that we have such a great community that is so passionate enough to come forward with over 1,000 submissions and ensure that we all have input.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor James.
Yeah, thank you, and thank you to all the staff, fellow councillors, and everyone involved in this whole process, because it has been a long process, and it's certainly been debated well and truly. I don't think there's any one of us in this room that are happy with the rate that's getting struck, but it is what it is. There's a lot of things that have happened in the last 3 or 4 years in the economy that none of us are happy with, but it's happened, so we've just got to get on and deal with it. I'm supporting this DLTP. I really feel that if we as a council don't support this LTP, I'll be really asking myself, what have we all been doing for the last 12 to 15 months when we've been discussing and debating? And I would go as far as saying that if we can't support it today, then we haven't been doing our job up in the last 12 months. Yep, I'm supporting it.
Councillor Tangios.
Thank you. Yeah, like others, I first of all want to thank all our staff who've put in such long hours to and done just such a huge amount of work to get this to us today with one decision. And all the staff who are here remotely. And I also want to thank the auditors for doing a really important job in raising those matters that you've raised and bringing them to our attention, so that we can properly consider them and make our decisions accordingly. I think this has been, process-wise, this has been the best LTP I've been involved in. It's my 3rd one, and I think that the kind of information that we've had available to us, the level of information we've had, and the amount of work that we've put in long hours ourselves to get us here. I think it's been the best LTP, and I think of all of them that I've been involved in, this one has been the most councillor-led. I feel like we've made significant decisions along the way, and then staff have gone to put flesh onto those. So I really think that this has been councillor-led and councillor-directed, and I really appreciate that. Because I know some people sometimes wonder whether councillors are led by staff, but I think that's certainly not the case here. We have really grappled with affordability because we know that our community is suffering, and people are in a number of people are in real financial hardship. So we've been grappling with that, and we've also been grappling with how do we provide the services our community needs. And that's not just infrastructure, but across the range of services that our community needs to thrive and be an attractive place to live, and for and to attract people to come work here, because we suffer a lack of all kinds of professions, including in the medical field and others, and so this has to be a place where people want to come and work. And as a council, we have to take a long-term view of the well-being of our community. There's been a lot of discussion in the public around some matters in the LTP that actually don't have a massive impact on rates and affordability. And I think if we go back to what the LTP actually says, the real big ticket items is the infrastructure spending. It's the roads and the water, and coupled with that is the cost of, the cost of inflation, rising interest costs. So those are the things that have really driven the rates up. And we don't have a lot of choices about those things. We have to have water coming out the taps. People have to be able to get it. The last thing I'm just going to say on those matters is the other matter is the three waters, which is coming back onto our budget sheet and has, as we've heard from the auditor today, has caused a number of problems in terms of us even being able to get the right information in front of the auditor. And just remind us that our council opposed three waters. We opposed that reform collectively, and many people in our community did, and people around the country did. And this is chickens coming home to roost, So we have to take some responsibility for that. In terms of public submitters, I have to say that I was really inspired, and I want to thank Tony for your comments around that, because I was really inspired by a number of submitters that came, and particularly many people who came and they talked about, out of their love for our communities, they talked about the hours that they put in, the energy they put into our communities, supporting our communities, especially rangatahi, and some of those coaches and clubs and stuff. It was amazing, that's what an amazing community that we're part of. So that was a real honour to hear all those stories. And finally, I just want to thank all of the councillors, because I think we had a really difficult task in front of us. We put a lot of work in to do it, and I think we've actually come with a really good LTP. It doesn't land everywhere we wanted it to land, but given the circumstances, I think we did a pretty damn good job.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, this is the 6th LTP that I've sat through, and to me it would have to have been the most complex and most controversial LTP. And I'd just like to think that this would be a lesson to future mayor, councillors and chief executive, that affordability has to be paramount in prioritising nice-to-have amenities as opposed to essential infrastructure replacements or upgrades. To come out with a potential 38% rate increase in December of 23 in the height of an unprecedented economic climate sent shivers across all our communities. From the onset of this LTP consultation process with our communities, the conversation I was having or hearing loud and clear was one of affordability. The 15% we finally arrived at was, in my opinion, at least 3% higher than where I wanted the rate increase to land. To vote down the LTP today delays the striking of the rate, throwing uncertainty across our district. Time is of an essence to assure our ratepayers of 4 3-monthly rate instalments throughout this financial year. I therefore reluctantly vote in favour of adopting the LTP, and in doing so thank the staff and thank Audit New Zealand and my fellow councillors for the input that they have all put into getting us to this point in time.
Councillor Boynton. O'Brien.
Certainly been a journey, and it's certainly been one with a lot of challenges for those of us who are new to this space. Some great learnings. To have rangatahi sit in front of us and ask us to think about the future. And to have our pakeke sit amongst us and say, what about those of us of the now? What's happening with us now? And then going home to listen to our people and saying, well, pretty pragmatic our people. It is what it is. It's landed where it is landed. The word I get from our people is mahia. Get on with it. We're not happy with it, with the rates. But we trust you to make those decisions. The amount of time and effort that our kaimahi and our councillors together have put into this time and space, the stresses you put on your family time, families together, I acknowledge that. And I thank you for that. I'm going to vote in favour of this LTP. I mean, too many hours, time and effort have been put into this to not support it. And let's, like my people have said, let's just get on with it, mahi. Kia ora tata.
Thank you. Councillor Dennis.
Thank you. I also acknowledge the amount of work the staff and my fellow councillors have put into this, and I acknowledge the fact of where we were and the huge rates that were initially suggested, and the amount of work the staff's done to chop and councillors to debate various issues to bring it down to where it is. But I actually don't agree where it's landed, I'm sorry. And, you know, I know one councillor here has already said that if we don't agree with the LTP, we haven't been doing our job, but I actually have been doing my job. I've debated all the way through. I've made suggestions, some of which have been accepted and some haven't. So I have been doing my jobs. But this is a democratic society, and we're allowed to have different opinions and still be friends, hopefully. But, you know, every time we chopped and slathered quite a few things that we did and brought some projects down to less than what they were hoped to be. But every time we asked about some of the internal costs of slashing those, we were told that the only thing left was to actually stop mowing some of the lawns and things like that. But you know, just recently when we won an award in Wellington, we flew 11 staff down to receive that award. Now to me that doesn't really sit that we're actually running a really frugal system. And I understand that when times are good, then that's fine, when the rates are low. But when people out there are suffering to the extent we've got a social supermarket in our main street, then we all need to slash costs. And personally, I can't see why we just didn't send 2 and then come back and have a backslapping ceremony with the rest of the 11. And so I think things like that. You know, when we rebuilt this building, we included a special executive conference room where the mayor's office used to be. And yet we still send our executives away 3 or 4 times a week to some flash place outside of our district for them to have time away and sit and think together. Why can't they go into the conference room and pull the curtains down? You know, people out there are suffering. And I drove down from Tauranga yesterday late in the evening, and where usually there's 1 or 2 people in some of the reserves up there camping out at night because they're homeless, I was actually stunned that there were 5 cars in there. Times are hard, and we need to pull our heads in and save our costs. I was always brought up to say that you save the pennies and save the pounds. So the pennies you spend on frivolous stuff and stuff that you can cut back on, you save those so you can spend the pounds on the really important stuff, the infrastructure, you know, and things like that. And so I personally believe that we could have brought that rate rise down to 13.5%, maybe 14%. And therefore I'm going to vote no to a 15% rate rise.
Thank you, Councillor. I guess that leaves me. Look, this has been a marathon. Staff and for councillors. And I'm glad we've reached the end of the race. It's been stressful and quite tiring. And I'm extremely appreciative of the input that we've had from our community that has made its voices heard. It's amazing. I was out there in the newspaper continually asking for people to make their voices heard. This democracy only works if we all participate in it. This plan is necessarily built on assumptions. They include assumptions of population growth, and as Shamabeel Iqab told us, never try and guess what the population is doing. That'll have an effect on revenue. There are assumptions about inflation. Compliance, that's a big one, because if we assume that the compliance, that, you know, that standards keep on rising, then there's no amount of money we can ever throw at anything to meet those heightened expectations of standards. What funding we can get is an assumption. But the biggest one of all is this one about affordability for me. At the start of the LTP, and for the last few years actually, I've been begging for a discussion about what affordability actually means, because for everybody in this room, that word has got a different meaning. I can afford the rates, no problems. So I wanted to have an objective, robust methodology for estimating what affordability actually means. And I'm grateful to our CFO for finally bringing it to the table on the 22nd of May. But that was at the end of the process, and one I wanted it at the front end of the process. So in the colloquial, you would call this ask about face. At the outset of the LTP development, I asked for spending restraint. We're in a difficult position. Times are tough, and I can just guess that things could get worse. So, in my estimation, and in the absence of any sort of quantitative treatment, I've done my own few numbers. I estimate that for a large swathe of this community, these rates are not going to be affordable. Sure, they've paid until now, but times are getting tougher, and there is the straw that breaks the camel's back. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Dennis said. We started with the first year rate rises, Deputy Mayor mentioned, in the 30s, and others have mentioned. We got down to 27.8, was published in the Beacon, in big red letters with my smiling face next to it. And we subsequently came down to 17%. A few days before we had to put the draft out there, we brought that down to 15%. But really what we did is move 2% onto the second year, and the second year went from 10% to 12.7%. The bottom line is that the compounding rate increase is 42% for the average whakatane rate in 3 years. So that's a lot. In my mayoral expectations document that I shared with everyone, I said I pleaded for tightening of our belts, do more with less, increase efficiency, and I asked to prioritise critical infrastructure projects. Do the real needs first, and then the nice to haves if you've got the money. Of the 15% average first year rate increase, about 3% is staffing and cost increases. We're putting on 32 new staff in the next 3 years. And our staff spend as a function of revenue is going up in a straight line. And that just can't carry on like that. That curve has to be bent sometime. So I also consider some of the staffing requests to be not very well justified. I have concerns, but I can't prove it, that our financing costs on debt will go from about 8 million in the first year up to 19 million by the 10th year of the plan. So I didn't get a lot of what I wanted in this LTP, and I find myself having to vote no to its adoption. Call it a conscience vote. As part of my pre-election campaigning, I told the community I was going to keep downward pressure on rates. And I hope that in this democratic process I've managed to achieve that in some small measure. If that's the case, then my conscience is clear. We've all got to do what our conscience tells us is right. And I've been deadly consistent throughout the whole of this process. So I will have to just stick with where I was, and I won't be supporting it. So with that, I guess Councillor Jukes, who moved it, has got a right of reply.
I don't think we've actually have said, and it's been great that we've all had the opportunity to actually say something, so I don't think I've got anything more to add. We'll just have to put it to the vote.
All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Aye. And we'll have it recorded. I'll have it recorded. And that takes us to the end of that paper, so I propose that we adjourn for morning tea for 15 minutes and come back at 10:30. Does that sound reasonable? Thank you, everybody. Welcome back, everybody. Final paper of the day is on us. 6.3, rates resolution for the period 1 July 24 to ending 30 June 25. Recommendations on page 476 of the agenda. I believe Gary's going to walk us through this one, Gary.
Yep. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay. Sorry, camera's not working, otherwise I would turn that on as well. So this resolution is in the standard form that we use each year for the adoption of rates, and then enables us to issue the rate invoices to the community. The information in here is consistent with the long-term plan that you adopted. In fact, it's essentially a duplicate of what we call the funding impact statement for rates that's included within the long-term plan. The key thing I'd probably point out on page 483 under point 4.10 is that with the delay in adoption that's proposed in this resolution, we have also adjusted the due dates and penalty dates associated with instalment 1. So we have pushed them back a month as well. So other than that, happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Gary?
Deputy Mayor. Thank you, Your Worship. Gary, I'm really sorry. Could you say that all over again? I was really struggling to hear what you were saying.
So the information, sorry, apologies for not being here. The information in the rates resolution is as per the long-term plan. And there is a section in the long-term plan called the funding impact statement, and this is consistent with that. The one thing I was pointing out at the end, Councillor Emmett, was section 4.10 defines the due date for each of the instalments, and we have, due to the delayed adoption proposed in this paper, we have also delayed the first instalment date by a month as well.
Thank you.
Okay, yep. Any other questions for Gary? No?
Move.
Moves Councillor Jukes, seconder Councillor Puller. This is just for the first part, because we're doing parts, to receive the report. So all those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Right. The second motion is that the Whakatane District Council sets the rates. Blah, blah, blah. I won't read it all out. So if you didn't vote to adopt, you probably shouldn't be voting for this bit. So are you moving, Councillor, or are you asking a question? He's moving.
I have a question.
Happy to move.
Oh, you have a question first.
Yes,
Okay.
on the paper.
Okay, ask your question.
Yeah, thanks very much, Gary. My question actually relates to page 478, and it's the targeted rates for the community boards. And what I wanted to ask was, at what point in the cycle do the community boards get to discuss what the targeted rate might be, or have the opportunity to go out to their communities to ask? So with my second LTP, I've not experienced a workshop or a information session on the communities, and we just look at Kaneatua Muripara, for example, and I know that their discretionary fund that they receive is a lot less than the other community boards, but I really feel like somewhere along the process this is not being followed. So when and where would this discussion or conversation occur with those communities?
So I'll probably pass that back to my colleagues in the room who will have been involved in the setting of those activities as part of the long-term plan.
Couldn't understand that.
you can pass
Putting
to
it back
some-
to the other
the
staff.
Yeah. Any comments from staff?
Well, in my experience, it's the community boards when they submit through the LTP, they've had that conversation and considering their submission, including what they would like to receive in terms of their discretionary fund, which leads on to the targeted rate. So it normally comes through the board through a submission process.
I think with the induction of new community boards and with elected members, this is an item that probably needs to have a bit of consideration, because I think the community boards just kind of, I'm not saying go with the flow, but if they're not informed about what they're able to do, then they can't be part of that discussion.
Fair enough. Councillor Dennis and then Councillor Isles.
Just for clarity in this matter, is there a difference between the costs of running a community board and the cost of the discretionary funds that they give out? I would have thought this was related to the costs of it, therefore the governance person that assists the amount of money the government says that we have to pay each community board member, etc., etc. Is that not what this is about? Because I thought that the boards themselves decided how much their discretionary fund was.
It's all. As far as I understand, it's the cost of the administration to run the community board and the discretionary fund allocation.
Don't they decide that? I've been on community board meetings in the past where we decide to keep it the same or increase it or decrease it.
Yes, so that's the discretionary component, that the community board does have that right to.
So this is the administration cost.
Both. So
Okay,
there'll be
thank
a
you.
reasonably standard administrative cost, and then there's the discretionary component, which is the difference.
Thank you.
Councillor Isles.
Thank you, Worship. At the Murupara Community Board meeting last week, this very point was brought up again, and the Community Board were indicating that, of course, this is not free money and that it is a further burden on high deprivation communities to have to fund it. Apparently, the amount had been, or the recommendation had been put into their submission, but didn't appear to be on their submission. And the question was asked then, could they review it? And I think the outcome was that there was a paper coming forward to the next Murupara Community Board meeting so that it could be worked through. So, again, I think it's a process that should be highlighted, because I think, as Deputy Mayor's rightly raised, community boards across the whole district possibly aren't aware of the actual process that's involved in getting that allocation straight.
Thank you, Councillor Isles. There are no further questions. We had mover and Councillor Fuller. Do I have a seconder for that motion? Councillor Duke seconds it. All those in favour?
Aye.
Against? Record it, please. And that brings us to the end of our meeting.
Actually, I was going to raise that, and I thought I would do it in the debate, but we ran out of time. But I just wanted to actually correct the record, because Councillor Dennis said that staff are going out and having hui off-site 3 or 4 times a week, and that's simply incorrect. And I think that we need to correct the public record on that, because that's not true.
2 or 3 times a week, didn't
That's
I?
what you said.
That's what you said.
I meant month, sorry. Sorry, a year. Quarterly. I said quarterly, I meant a year, sorry.
All right, noted. Well, that's the end of business for today, folks. So could I please ask Councillor O'Brien to close us with a here, thanks.
Kia ora tātou. Uchi wa tātou. Kia tau naki tanga te meangaro I rungi tēnei tēnō mātou kia maha ai tuku. Toi te kuku, toi te mana kai a, toi ngā tukunga koe a, te whakairi a, te whakawātea. Hau mie, hui e.
And thank you to everybody who's been involved with this marathon that we've been running, and members of the public online or thank you very much.